Hi, Jesse. Welcome to Parandoleo here with Becky Boricua. So nice to meet you and so nice to get the opportunity to chat a little bit with you today. How are you? ¿Cómo estás?
I'm great. How are you?
Great, great. Likewise. I'm so excited to be here chatting with you. Tell me a little bit about your role of Roberto and Ambulance, which is the movie that releases on 4K UHD, Blu-ray and DVD on June 14. It was released earlier this year, but it's now on DVD in a couple of days. Tell me about your role
hmm
for it.
Yeah, my mom's so excited that it's coming out on Blu-ray. She lives in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, so she's like, the streaming is terrible out there. So she's like, I can't wait to get it. She's probably gonna
Get a
buy it.
physical copy,
I
yeah.
know. Go watch it every day, all day. I'm like,
Uh, Gotta give it up for
I put.
moms, our biggest supporters.
I know. It's really funny. There's like a shrine of me on one of her walls, like the weirdest pictures. I'm like, that's the picture you chose. It's really funny. I play Roberto. I'm my dad and I kind of run this organization in LA, and I'm one of Jake's friends in the movie. And so Jake and his brother are in the middle of a heist, and the heist goes wrong, and they call me and they call Poppy to help them get out of trouble. So that's kind of what we're doing throughout the movie.
So this is exciting. You also collaborated on this movie. There's another fellow Latina, Isa Gonzalez, in this movie. And the reason I bring her up is because I want to ask you a little bit about diversity in Hollywood. You've been around for several years. You've participated on several films and shows. As someone that works inside the industry, because we can have our own our own idea or our own views of what's going on in Hollywood. Tell me a little bit about diversity in Hollywood as an insider, because it's different from someone that's had the experience of being in and going through castings and all that stuff. Tell me a little about your experience with diversity in Hollywood, and if you think that over the years we've been making strides or what else is needed.
I think we have been making strides within diversity. I think, um, especially in the last like 5 years or so, where cancel culture has gotten to be really, really prevalent, and information is immediately available, that the studios and the decision makers have no choice but to listen and to make changes. Otherwise, that and it ends up costing the money makers and decision makers money. You know what I mean? Like they'll boycott a show, or they'll boycott a movie, or they'll cause enough a ruckus and start fires that can be, very costly. So I think as a business standpoint, people are kind of like paying attention for that, but then they're realizing that that it's actually the representation matters. That especially Latinos, we go and watch movies, and we go and we rent, we watch everything, and if we see someone that's representative of our culture, we're especially going to pay attention to it. And I think it's also our responsibility as Latinos to support each other, no matter the project, whether it's a like predominantly Mexican cast, or Puerto Rican or Dominican, XYZ, that is that shows that we're supportive of each other, and that the numbers keep going up. I think we are making strides. I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think part of the solution is actually writing, producing, directing, and getting our own material distributed. Whether if it's a story about, it is a story about Maria the housemaid, you know what I mean, or if it's a story about Jesse, the entrepreneur that came from nothing to becoming something. Yeah. So it's, I think there's room for all these stories, and I think we're getting there. And I think as long as we keep supporting each other, and you have to be so good they can't ignore you.
So you touched on 2 points that I kind of actually want to talk about now that you touched on them. One of them is supporting each other in general, because I feel like as Latinos, we do get a lot of that. Like, oh, it's a Mexican and I'm, Puerto Rican or Cuban, so I'm not going to support him. Or it's a Mexican and it's like, well, they're Dominican or they're Puerto Rican, I'm not going to go and support them. And I think one of the most important things that we as Latinos have to realize is that we have to support each other no matter what, because if we're fighting against ourselves, the outside people aren't really going to support. You know what I mean? Sometimes we get more support from outside people than our own people. And I think that you touched on that, and it's very important because it does show, you know, and in films we've seen it where it's been, you know, let's say a predominantly Caribbean cast, you know, and then the Mexicans won't go because they're like, well, they're not my people, I'm not going to support. And I think that's so important that you touched on that, because I do think that is one of the things that happens on our end as Latinos, the lack of support a lot of the times in these projects. So I'm glad that you touched on that. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you was, now that you touched on it, you mentioned, you know, writing and producing these stories. Do you think, as a person from the inside of the industry, do you think that there needs to be given more opportunity to writers and directors that are, I know, incorporating Latino characters, but maybe giving opportunity to more Latino writers, directors, and producers? Or do you think that that's really irrelevant and we should just include more Latino people, you know, in the cast?
I feel like there should be opportunities given. I don't feel like at the end of the day, it's still a business. I don't think
Correct.
anyone's going to be given anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just because you're whoever.
Totally agree.
Or you're whatever. I think it still has to be earned. I think we still have to write good stories. I think the work has to be proven, even if you're an understudy or a mentee that's, you know, trying to come in, intern, whatever it is that you're coming in just to be in a writing room and you know, pitch specs, scripts or storylines or a joke or whatever it is, and kind of like get in there. I think the opportunities are happening. I think there needs to be more opportunities, especially within shows that are predominant, like have a Latin storyline or a Black storyline or whatever it is. There should be someone that's representative of that to keep the storyline honest.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
No, and I totally agree with the fact that, you know, it's not going to be given, like, we're not going to give you the role just because we need to have a Latino. If there's no Latino actors that are actually living up to the role, or, you know, we're not just going to give it to you. And I totally agree with that. But I just wanted to see your thoughts on, you know, should more opportunities be given, you know, as someone on the inside, or you answered that question.
Absolutely. I think they should be given. And I think there are programs that most of the studios are doing to help like discover, you know, diverse voices. And a lot of my friends, like they're, you know, they started in some of these programs and are directing really predominant TV shows and being successful and getting in some of these writing rooms. And I think it's working. And I think the powers that be are figuring it out. And they're figuring that, you know, because if we watch a TV show and we see the storyline that's especially Latino, and it's dishonest, we're gonna make noise. You know what I mean? There's the Instagram and Twitter.
We're gonna say it.
You guys, someone's gonna say something, and like, you know what I mean? And you know, I look at stuff too, and I go, like, where was the voice in the room when that was going on?
Totally.
You know what I mean? Totally. But at the same time, it's like, I think one of the things I've been saying for years is that we can't just come up with the problems. We have to be part of the solution.
Totally. I love that.
You know what I mean?
I love that, Jesse. I love that. And I love getting an inside perspective on that, because like I said, us as consumers, we can have our own ideas as to what's going on in Hollywood, but we don't really necessarily know. Since you've been around for a while, that's why I wanted to get your input. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you also, now going back to you mentioned Wyoming. How does a kid from Wyoming make it into Hollywood? What was the process of you getting there? Was it easy, not only coming, I guess, from Wyoming, but also being a Latino? And tell me a little bit more about like your Latino background.
My dad's from Mexico. My mom's from Wyoming, but she's Spanish and a bunch of other stuff. I haven't done her 23andMe. I went to, my story's crazy. In high school, I played football, wrestling, and track. And out of all of those things, somehow I got a cheerleading scholarship.
Really?
Yeah, so I went to a junior college in Wyoming for a couple of years, Eastern Wyoming College, and then I made the squad at University of Nebraska for the Cornhuskers. Okay. So I was there for a year, and while I was in Nebraska, I met a girl, a friend of mine, Her name's Jennifer Jurasic, and the short story is that she can at the end of the school year, she convinced me to move to Atlanta, Georgia, to study acting with her. And acting was never on my radar. It was never something like as a kid, like you hear a lot of actors like, I've always wanted to be an actor. That wasn't part of my programming. Part of like, oftentimes in middle America, like it's not, you're programmed to have a blue collar job and,
Totally.
hope to survive, hope to thrive, but not really much more than dreaming big. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I was studying a bunch of things that I really didn't like, but hoping to make some money so that I could live a decent life. But in the back of my mind, I kind of always like, oh, I'm interested in photography and art and pottery and stuff like that. But it was never like, it was veering off of the timeline into a different multiverse that wasn't what my programming was. You know what I mean? So I end up following this girl, Jennifer, and I end up driving to Atlanta, Georgia to study at this place called What Films with this actor, producer, director named Judson Vaughn. And that was Memorial Day weekend 2000. So like it just passed that I've been doing this for like 22 years.
Yeah.
So I stayed there for a few years, booked a couple things here and there, moved to LA in December 2003. Oh. And, I was always proactive. Even when I was in Atlanta, I somehow got breakdowns that were probably a week old, but I would send headshots in, like I'd mail them from Atlanta. I didn't know at the time that's not how it worked. A lot of these roles are cast like the next day or within a week, you know what I mean? By the time my headshot got there, they were on to another episode. So I get to LA and I get online and I start looking at online castings and submitting myself to things here and there. I managed to get myself a commercial agent. Couldn't find a theatrical agent because commercial agents are easier to find. And this is 2003, 2004. End of 2004, end up, last pennies that I had, I ended up booking this McDonald's campaign, which kind of like started getting me a little bit more momentum. And right at the beginning of, I found this casting online for this little non-union movie called Quinceañera. Mm-hmm. And I submitted for it, got an audition, ended up booking it, and that kind of started my TV and movie career.
That's so awesome. I love that story. I love the story of how you made it to Atlanta and how also I think how you mentioned like it wasn't something that you always wanted to do because I know sometimes, like you mentioned, there's actors that are like, oh my God, I've been dreaming of this my whole life. You know what I mean? So it's nice to see, someone that is like, hey, I gave it a try and I loved it and I'm doing great. So thank you so much, Jesse. I appreciate your time. I know that there's other people waiting to interview, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I loved chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time, even though you're a little bit sick from COVID. I wish you the best, not only in your recovery, but also in your career. We can't wait to see you on DVD and Blu-ray on June 14th on Ambulance. We wish you the best. Un beso y un abrazo y que te recuperes pronto. Thank you so much for your time, and also congrats on representing us in an amazing way in Hollywood. It was a pleasure speaking.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Gracias. Bye.
Ciao.